Here we are back with our PowerPoint. Back with Patrick.
So Patrick Titterton, Joint Fiscal Office. We have 3 slides left that are not title slides. Is there? All right. The first one that we're going to look at is just a simple table. It's showing you the net impact of all 3 changes at once. So state corporate income tax, 19.3 million estimated increase. The personal income tax change, that's estimated 114.8 million. And then we have that 14.3 million decrease due to the expansion of the EITC. So everything put together, this package is estimated to be about $119.8 million in increased revenue for fiscal year 25. Okay. And we do have some considerations, and I know that you'll probably get into a lot of this discussion as you go along. But we have some things to think about, and maybe shed some positive light on all of these things. Increasing, and some of these we've talked about already, but increasing all of the income tax brackets gives you that broad base, which is important for reliability and sustainability of the funding. And by applying it to all the income tax brackets, you don't need to raise, you can have a relatively lower rate increase if just applied it to, maybe, let's say the top 2 brackets, because you're applying it to a much wider base, right? So like I said, the broad base helps keep up a reliable, sort of sustainable funding source. This is a program, early care, that will have, it's a continuing program that will have needs annually, right? So you want to make sure that the funding mechanism for such a long-term project like that is sufficient to meet its needs. Again, increasing all the tax rates by the same amount. It's simple to understand. It's sort of a relatively easy sort of administratively, logistically mechanism for targeting, I think, the tax base, which is what your intention here to do is. Again, it includes households with children who are beneficiaries there, but it also includes pass-through income, which again is a sort of expressed intent from you all that you want to make sure businesses are paying their fair share in the context of pass-through income. They aren't paying corporate income tax, so we have to look to the personal income tax system to get at that. Talked about the beneficiaries, and then sort of this idea of the back-end credit does tie back to sort of that 4th key principle that we're sort of tasked with getting to, in that for the lowest income Vermonters, in some cases we saw that this expansion of the EITC will actually result in a net tax decrease for them, even though the tax rate for them is going up. For those lowest income Vermonters, you are providing some tax relief to them with this package. So I guess the top line there is, yes, we're looking at a tax increase to the tune of about $100 million on the personal income side. But within that, there are people, specifically low-income people, who are seeing a tax break. And some things just to think about as you're ironing this out. So even with the back-end credit, there are many lower and middle-income taxpayers that will experience a tax increase and receive no direct benefit from the system. Specifically, this would be like households without children who don't really have an avenue to take advantage of it. Maybe retired people who, again, don't have children, but they would be receiving a direct benefit from an early care program like this.
But they would receive an indirect benefit, right?
There is societal benefits, which, you know,
I know you.
I don't want to get philosophical
Yeah.
here. That's
why I said it instead of you saying.
And as we saw, the 10% top marginal rate for corporate income tax would put Vermont on the high side nationally. So just when thinking about, you know, how you compare ourselves to other states, it's just something to keep in mind. And so the third piece here is just that the legislature did make some very extensive changes to how corporate tax is administered last year. And so that did result in some businesses receiving a tax decrease because of the shift to single sales factor and some other changes that were made. So if we're talking about sort of businesses' ability to plan and sort of look forward as is important for them, it's just a year after making some of these extreme changes, or not extreme, significant changes, to then be coming in with a tax increase could be, you know, it's a quick change to make after a big change. So again, it's just something for you all to think about. But I think that kind of is my last slide here. My last important message is just to thank you all for sitting through all of that information. I know we kind of had to buckle up for a lot of things there, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Can you go back one slide? I just didn't read the last bullet.
I guess to avoid the outlier point in your number 2 observation, and perhaps the last comment, narrative comment in number 3, having done something that probably favors a slice of corporate Vermont. I'm wondering, would we avoid the outlier issue at number 2 if we change the interval from the relatively low net income of 25,000? That's sort of where I'm thinking, because other states obviously have bracketed, but they have different intervals. And I'm just wondering if that's a way for us to get around the observation that you just made.
You are absolutely able to do that, but I will make a couple of notes about that. So the first being that if hypothetical, let's say that we leave the existing brackets the same and we create a new top tier bracket at $1 million, and that's where your 10% starts. All of the income below the $1 million in that income is, you know, there's no change in how that's taxed. It would only be the income above that 1 million. And so what happens there is that you would be raising less money than this estimate is showing.
Sure.
So it's absolutely something that could be done.
Yeah.
For sure. Just when you're weighing it, just know that it will raise less money.
Yeah.
Just to say that this was a very thorough and very helpful presentation that I really appreciate.
Thank you.
Thank you for your patience with us while we were patient.
You guys are always easy.
Really? Fine. Thank you. Yeah.
We need to raise 120 million.
That is an excellent question, and
Joyce is going to be here in 45 seconds.
yes, Joyce is going to give you all that information, which includes up-to-date changes from the Human Services Committee. Yes.
Oh, please.
We're going to be at ease for a moment.
I think I have another Joyce question, but can we expect to spend the full amount the very first year, and what about the second year? So do we need 120 million more or less each year starting the year?
You will have explicitly clear detail in this, in an updated table that Joyce is gonna have.
Okay.
It shows you all the net funding needs and all of that. And right on cue, I'll yield this seat.
Quick, I said you'd be here in 45 seconds, and you really were here for 45 seconds. All of a sudden, I was just using it as a figure of speech. So that's good for me. That's great. You're on, yes, and we just had 2 questions that were specifically for you, so we're all ready for it. Oh, I just posted 2 documents. Okay, thank you. And there are 2 documents that are fresh on your browser if you refresh.
For the record, I am Joyce Manchester with the Joint Fiscal Office. Yep, fancy, unknown error. Oh, no. It's joining me. Good. So I'm going to be talking to you about the 7-year tables that we started to look at yesterday.
I think that was.
Okay, and they have been updated a bit because House Human Services made some changes to the bill yesterday. They reduced the costs in a couple of places, 3 places, I believe, and I will talk about that. I'm not sure, Madam Chair, if you want to look at part 1 again. I could just say what the changes are. Or do you want to look? Okay. Okay.
Big stuff, and I think it's helpful for us all to get a refresher every time we go back in. Yes.
Okay, and I need to pull up those 2 documents. Okay, yeah. Yeah. Okay, which, is this part 1? Oh, good, part 1, excellent.
It says as of April 19th, but it's actually April 20th.
Oh, I forgot to update it, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. And let me be sure that I have the right numbers that are showing. 19, yeah, those are the correct numbers. Okay, good. So you saw this yesterday in the same format and pretty much the same numbers, except for a few places. So remember, I'm looking at FY24.
Can they get bigger?
Yes, absolutely. That's not
Lovely.
excellent. Yes, so I'm looking at FY24, which remember is just 5 months of the new program expansion for early care and education and after school. So those numbers have not changed, the 44.8 million, the almost 9 million. What has changed is the CDD administrative, both internal and contracting costs. That used to be 6 million and they've dropped that to 4 million. That was their judgment call about how much administrative costs CDD might need. The readiness payments used to be 25 million and they've dropped that to 18,873,235. And the reason for that specific dollar amount is so that they would end up at zero under needed new funding. Okay. There also used to be a line here for the new deputy secretary in AOE, and they have dropped that as well, thinking that they don't need that position at this time. Okay, so those are the changes in the S56 as passed by House Human Services late yesterday afternoon. Changes in FY.
Just one second, just so everyone on the committee knows, so it's then being referred to House Ed, and then we'll come here from there. So there are still chances for more changes, including when it gets here, but just.
Do we know what the vote was coming out of human?
And one, I believe.
Yes.
Okay, in FY '25, okay, everything looks the same until we get down, and even the CDD administrative costs looks the same because we had the 4 million ongoing and growing by inflation, so that's the same. The quality incentive and capacity payments were cut in half from 20 million down to 10 million. And again, that was their judgment call on how much would be the appropriate amount. And you can see that we're still missing the deputy secretary. It's just gone from all 7 years. So the new bottom line there is about 83.6 million. And then I'm still using Pat's same numbers. I don't think those have changed, right? Good, excellent. And so if we do the personal income tax brackets, the top corporate tax rate, and expanding the EITC, we get down to 123.9 million of funding that's not needed in that year, right? Oh, no, I'm sorry, this is net funding. So that's just adding up the revenue sources. I'm getting ahead of myself. Okay, and then the difference between funding and need is the 119.4 million in the first year and the 40.3 million in the second year, okay? But notice that we also have pre-K that's coming along, and we think that might be implemented in FY '27.
Joyce, I actually don't think the money would be available on FY '24.
Oh,
Sorry.
is that right? When does the income tax start,
So
et cetera?
it's fairly unusual to create an income tax that's
Isn't it?
adjustment that counts for the year that we're in.
Oh, where you pass the, so that FY '24 column should go.
I think,
Is,
right?
I mean, you can make it effective whenever you like.
I understand.
But, so the 123, reason that's different is just inflated for, to account for inflation, but that baseline of 119, you could delete it.
that would be gone. Okay. Okay, good to know. Okay, so that will be a change. All right, so we're looking at public pre-K.
Oh, sorry, 1 second.
Would it actually be half? Because if you started January 1, 24, wouldn't you get 6 months of revenue,
Oh, in the fiscal,
right?
No, because it's an income.
Which runs calendar year.
Yeah.
Fiscal year
it's
is.
Fiscal year.
So you would book it
but it wouldn't book it. That's right.
Would be half
Ah,
in 24?
well, but most income tax is not paid until the following April.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
Unless you want to count estimated tax payments, I don't know how that works.
That's a good point.
But we usually book. And it's not that chart up there, so bad. Pat, can you weigh in on this? Because I feel like we usually book revenue for income taxes and then. Okay, so it's a full year.
Your takings are, yeah.
Okay.
It's consistent with how we
Okay.
typically estimate this.
Okay, so I'm now confused. So if the income tax rate changes were implemented as of January 1st, 24, we would not realize those monies until April of 25, which is FY '25. Right, so those numbers would stay. Okay. So it's just the FY '24. Okay, good to know. Okay, now we're back to public pre-K. And the JFO estimate is about 40 million if it were implemented in now. essentially now. So we've grown that number by inflation, and we end up at 43.8 million starting in FY '27. Good. Okay.
That's just the require public pre-K 5-day, all day for 4-year-olds?
I don't think it's required. I don't think it's mandatory, right? I think that's just telling school districts that they need to offer it, but not requiring every 4-year-old child to attend.
That's what I meant, and required means the school
The
district.
school district
has to offer,
must,
yeah.
yes.
But not like first grade, which is required.
Yes,
for
right.
parents.
One thing I'm not understanding is the cut of the position at AOE all across the board. Is that because the hope is that AOE would absorb the cost of that position?
I don't know the answer to that. We would have to ask somebody who listened to the full House Human Services discussion, which I have not done yet.
I have questions for the Human Services Committee about some of those reductions and if they made them in order to fit into our existing FY '24 available dollars and whether they could be put in for FY '25, but I will follow up with the Human Services Committee to figure out. Yes.
Am I right that the CFAP offset has not been disturbed? Those are the same numbers from 27 forward into the future? Yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. Those are a percentage of the public, of the 0 to 4 CCFAP rate and eligibility expansion.
Right.
So that hasn't changed.
Okay.
Right. Good. Okay.
I was waiting to see if Kurt would catch this, but it looks like you should have a $1 balance at the end of needed new funding.
Oh, I did have a $1 balance. I had to make it go to 0. You're very astute. Yes, very good.
Kurt will catch it.
I wanted to give you a chance.
Yes, I assume that there are cents or rounding or something there and
Yeah.
yeah. Right, okay, so I'm going to stop sharing part 1, is that good? And I'm going to go on to part 2. It's possible I don't yet have part 2 up, let's see. Okay, sent 2. Okay. Two is fine. Here's part 1. That is part, oh, I know, maybe. I'm screen sharing, and this is part 2. Oh, good, excellent, excellent, excellent. Okay, big. There we go. Okay, part 2. Well, in the best of worlds, Pat would walk you through the PFL, the paid family leave. Do you want to walk through it, or shall I just do it? Do you want just the summary?
Just the, we don't need to put the family. I think it'll confuse the conversation if we don't.
Okay, so let's just focus attention on early care and education plus pre-K. Is that good? Yes?
Yes.
And I will say that if the chair is thinking about an earlier version of this chart, I have now added education funding equal to public pre-K costs to the revenues line, okay? Because anything that's in the ed fund has to be funded. And so we would assume that it would be funded through the education fund. Okay? Okay, so the costs here are for early care and education, plus, as you remember, pre-K starts in FY '27, okay? So this is just adding up the costs, so we're at 71.7 million That grows to a full year at 135.5 million. It grows with inflation. Remember, there's no further increase in eligibility or the reimbursement rate. So that's at 139.5. Then we add the public pre-K expenditure on 177. The following year, we go to 75% of the way to the high quality early care and education program. So in FY28, we're at 236.5. FY29, we go all the way to 100% as calculated for us by RAND and grown with inflation. So those reimbursement rates take another jump up, and we're at 298 million. And then it grows with inflation after that. Okay. And on the revenue side, starting in FY24, that would be zero. My mistake. That would be zero. But then we would move into FY25 at 175, FY26, and then we're just growing until we get to FY27, which includes extra, 43 million that has to be funded through the education fund. So those revenues would appear through the education fund to fully offset the cost of public pre-K. In FY28, we're still growing the income tax, corporate tax, and the expansion of the EITC. But there we are at 234, grows to 240, 245, and so forth. And then we have a difference between revenues and costs. So forget this, that is incorrect. We'd have a minus 71.6 million there, right? In the following year, we would have excess funds of about 40 million, 41.6 million, 52 million, and then there are deficits going forward after that.
Questions, thoughts?
I'm just curious, you've been following this conversation. This public pre-K thing, I said a lot of, that's not our thing. A lot of money, it's a big shift in the system. Curious to see how that conversation evolves as it goes through AHS and Human Services and House Ed.
So Human Services left it to House Ed. I think they just.
I was down there for 4 years. I know what that conversation is.
I think what House Ed is likely wrestling with is whether, right, we've talked a lot in this committee already about the inequity, right, between the folks who are offering full day, folks who aren't offering full day, and how the ed fund's covering that with half, with the half.
Oh, it's.
Yeah. And so I think House Ed is wrestling with whether it makes sense to have a full weight for schools that are offering full day pre-K now, or whether they should wait until, whatever the Human Services Committee said was the date certain to move to a full number. And just sort of flagging for the committee in the context of all of this, we're gonna need to do a bill next session to do some weighting cleanup. There were some conforming changes that were just sort of needed that we didn't do last year. There's some questions about how things might shake out with new appraisals, and how that's gonna impact some of the things we did. There's a pre-K weight, and there's a study that's due from Professor Colby on EL, English language learning. And so we're gonna need to tackle some piece of that next year. And so we'll have a chance to go deeper into sort of what that pre-K implementation might look like from a funding perspective next year.
It is quite a little wrestling match between the public schools and the pre-K providers and AHS and AOE. It is ball of yarn to unwind.
And I understand why, I mean, I wasn't here, so I don't entirely understand why 166 wound up where it did, but I imagine it was a lot of that wrestling match. And I think we have a responsibility to fix it to some degree in one direction or another. And I think the weighting task force punted on it to this, to the RAM study in order to fix it, right? We were very explicit that we were punting to this moment for it. Yeah.
That's where I was curious whether Ed is going to recommend to us whether the choice a school makes between a full day or not a full day would be incorporated into the weight structure or some other way to reflect it. They're going to weigh in on that.
Yeah, they're going to weigh in on the weight.
Okay.
And it's already reflected in the weight structure, it's just reflecting the weight structure in a way that makes no sense to anyone.
Okay. Yeah.
And they'll have to weigh in on the payment too.
Yeah. Okay.
I would also add one more element to the mix, and this is something that Julia Richter in our office often brings up, and that is that there's a facilities study that's underway of all the schools. Structures. And of course, a classroom for 4-year-olds is going to look quite different from a classroom for 10-year-olds. And so when they're doing the facilities survey, you would hope that they would be collecting information that would let everybody know what needs to be done to allow public pre-K to happen in every school district. So that could also include the legislature making more decisions about money.
And we voted out that school construction and modernization bill.
I wonder if, though, to make sure that that thought process happens, whether we or Ed should do something, say, ask the extant school board, well, what are your initial thoughts on all day or not all day before we go build something? Because that makes a big difference, or will make a big difference in the reconstruction.
I'm sorry.
To ask, even before the study is done, whether a school district intends to embrace all day or not all day before we worry about reconstructing schools on an assumption which may turn out to be false.
Well, I think the bill itself, right now as passed, is full day
Okay.
for 4-year-olds,
Full week, full day.
like kindergarten, not required of the parent, required of the school.
So one would think when the study committee goes and does its work, the assumption is that that commitment will be carried out. And so you'll build it for 4-year-olds. Okay.
I am still, would love the committee's thoughts on, we heard some businesses on Tuesday. I can't believe how hard it is. It's real. We heard from the businesses on Tuesday about both the sort of idea of finish this or don't do it. And that, includes the Vermont Business Roundtable feeling very clear about that and feeling clear that it's a hard thing to sort of be raising revenue in one way and then come back in 4 years and say like, oops, we didn't finish, let's raise more revenue. And so I'm wrestling with what structures make sense in order to be like really clear about what this might look like long-term and sort of those red numbers on the third row in the last 3 columns. Thank you, Joyce. And so we'd love just for folks to sit with that. And of course, those numbers, going out to FY30, JFO, will be happy to tell us like, we can't predict what FY30 will look like in a real way. Those numbers are probably far from perfect. We just know it's going to be more than is needed in FY '27.
But of the review of revenue changes and/or tax credit changes, they don't all have to be incorporated in the same date. And I'm just wondering whether in the early bill, staggering some of those to make sure that the out years are covered can always be changed in the future if it's unneeded, but it would be better for it to be anticipated at the front end.
What's on you? Anything else from Charlie?
I don't think so. Yes, I mean, if there were to be a slowdown, we're calling it now a slowdown in growth, not a recession, but a slowdown in
I
growth.
like that, thank you.
These numbers would look different, for sure. I also think there's going to be a lot of feedback from the early care and education sector along the way about how this new setup is working and are they really able to hire the staff they need, and are families aware of the new CCFAP program and so forth. So these numbers are a shot in the dark. I shouldn't say a shot in the dark. That doesn't give us enough credit. But they are our best guess, best estimate as of today. And of course, things are going to change.
Thank you. I think we all have lots of thinking to do, and see everyone tomorrow morning at